My name is Lerato Libita. Welcome to my channel, The Prestige Play, where we discuss and debunk all things wealth management, family offices, succession planning, structuring, and investments, and all topics of interest. You ready? Let's get into it. Good morning. Welcome to The Prestige Play with Ms. Lerato Libita. Today, I'd like to welcome James and Johan from Wine Cellars. Gentlemen, kindly introduce yourselves.
Lerato, great to be here. I am the CEO of Wine Cellar. We are based in Cape Town Observatory. We're a 25-year-old family-run business, and we specialize in all things fine wine. We're a classic fine wine merchant, retailing, importing, and storing people's wines, and also offering a little bit of an investment angle on all of these. Very nice to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me, Johan. Can you please introduce yourself?
Roger, thank you very much. Thanks very much for having us. So I grew up without any wine experience or any wine exposure, but I got involved in the world of wine after school, spending a bit of time on the farm and getting my hands dirty in the vineyards and during harvest, and just really became fascinated with the product that is fine wine. Spent a bit of time working in other industries, and the opportunity came up to partner up with Wine Cellar, and I got involved with Wine Cellar, looking after the secondary market. So the wines that James alluded to that people have stored with us, inevitably there's always a demand for older wines, and I look after that part of the business, as well as putting portfolios together for people, and then also all things relating to Bordeaux and a lot of interesting European wine. So great to be here. Thanks for having us.
So I've always been an avid lover of wine, and James and I have also enjoyed a few glasses over the last summit where we all met. The beautiful thing that I discovered through the summit was that wine is an investment. So it's not about just consumption only. Johan, I'd like for you to just discuss the investment side of it.
Thanks, Roger. So the base for fine wine investment starts with consumption. The nature of fine wine is that it is an agricultural product, so even though we view it, regardless of which price spectrum wine consumers drink, we often forget that it's really a function of raw, slow agricultural product, grapes ripen on a vine. From that, they are picked, and the wine is made out of it. And the consequence is that wine production is limited. Each vintage, it's one of the very few, if not the only, I'm on correction, agricultural products where, by looking at the label many years after the production of the product itself, you can actually still see when this product was made. And the result of that is that over time, the specific supply of a particular vintage diminishes, so there's less of it available. And in simple demand supply curves of economics, that would mean that if supply diminishes, demand remains the same. At the same time, you have higher pricing. But in addition to that, wine has a qualitative aspect built into it, where the great wines of the world and fine wine, and I guess we'll touch on what exactly fine wine is in a little bit later, but the great wines of the world, the fine wines, really appreciate with quality over time. People who enjoy drinking great wines know that there's certain aspects and qualities and complexities that reveal itself out of great wine over time. And so you have a bit of a double effect in that when supply diminishes, demand not only stays the same, but in the right wines or wines that are built to last, the demand might actually increase as avid consumers of a particular wine actually require that specific vintage. And so that's what drives the basic investment case for fine wine. And the old European model of investing in wine was really consumption driven again. You would have, in the town wherever you would stay in Bordeaux, for example, you would buy from the producers around you, in a very informal or informal way and not a formalized market. You would buy from your mates around you who all produce great wine, but you would also understand that due to the classification and the esteem of many of the great estates, that if you buy one or two of those cases and you keep them for a number of years and you sell them back to the market, they will actually fund the wines that you can enjoy from your friends, those wines you like to drink who produced around you. And that's really how basic wine investment started. And from there, just proliferated and grew.
Okay, so before we discuss further about wine as an investment, because there are triggering points about it being accessible as an MC, I'd like to go to James. James, you and I enjoyed a few glasses together. So let's talk about the different wines that you have available, the bodies that are there available to the market. And I know as well, even your sales ladies have also reached out to me and started putting together packages. So let's talk further about that, James.
Yeah, thank you, Lerato. I think fine wine is an important category to understand. South Africa produces some of the greatest wines in the world, and we should be proud of that. But what we do as a fine wine merchant is that we import wines from some of the best regions in France and Europe and across the world, for that matter. You include America, Argentina, Chile. And besides importing fine wines, which is just for us to bring some of the greatest benchmarks in the world to the South African public, we also have great close relationships with some of our best winemakers and have these beautiful allocations that we get from them. And then we share this with our client, with our database. We send them emails introducing the wines and then put these parcels together for them. I think what's crucial about fine wine is to understand that it is something that there's a scarcity element to it. In other words, you take a wine like Kononko Paul Sour, which I think from a South African point of view should be relatively well known at the moment. This comes from a small 7-hectare piece of land, and it can only come from that piece of land. There's something unique to it for many regions, but the reasons are climate, the specific soil types it's on, and then also the vision of the producer. You know, this is a producer that's gone through, it's on its 4th winemaker now, but they've managed to keep that same kind of aesthetic and craftsmanship going that makes sure this wine has this pedigree that's building up. Fine wine, especially from an investment angle, is a wine that also has a pedigree. In other words, it's got a reputation that's built on quality. It's got a reputation that's built on perceived market value. In other words, it is subjective. It is in the eye of the drinker. And at the end of the day, that's a crucial part of it. You know, your wine is investable if someone else wants to buy the wine. Other elements of fine wine is how it's been stored, how it's been looked after. That's also something that Wine Cellar engages with. We offer professional storage facilities. I think if you're an amateur wine drinker or a novice or you're beginning and you want to buy really something special, it's always good to try and store it as well as possible. It is crucial or critical for long-term kind of investment possibilities. But I think, you know, if you have a wine fridge at home, that's a good place to start. As you grow your collection, it's good to have a proper cellar. Proper cellar needs a few things. It needs to be dark. Light damages wine. That's why wine comes in dark green or brown bottles. The other thing is temperature. Wine should not go over a certain temperature, then it gets damaged. That temperature is preferably always below 17 degrees. Ideal storage is between 13 and 16 degrees. The third element is humidity. You need a certain amount of humidity, between 60 and 70%. That's important to make sure that your corks don't dry out, which will then cause your wines to oxidize. So those are elements about fine wine, and we do all kinds of wines. I think fine wines come in the shape of champagne, sparkling wines, in dry reds. There's a trend towards white wines as well. Some of the greatest white wines I've had were from 1930s, so they can age. Sweet wines, obviously port. So there's a great array of fine wines and categories in that sense that we service as well.
You touched on something very interesting about storing and serving. So my biggest argument that we've always had with those around me has been about what room temperature is. It's always said, serve it at room temperature. And room temperature, according to any wine connoisseur, would be anything between 17 and below. So meaning that, as you had mentioned, putting it in a wine fridge or a wine cellar, ensuring that it is below. And then in South Africa, you'll always find that people wanted yes, red wine at room temperature, but room temperature here is 23, 24. And people always
Correct.
say, don't put ice in that because you're destroying the body of it. But if we actually think about it, it's supposed to be served at 17 degrees or below.
Yeah, so add a bit of nuance to this, what is really crucial. One, I want everybody to be drinking wine. I want South Africans to be proud of this incredible product that we have here. We're the best wine producing country on the continent, which is something really special. But drink your wine the way you want to drink it. That's the first place we start. But wine is this magical and mystical thing where there is so much for you to learn that every step that you take, you can discover some more elements. So when it comes to temperature, I think South Africa's got another little element. Is if you're in a room of, say, 20 to 30 degrees, basically your wine loses almost like a degree to 2 degrees when you pour the wine. So you actually want to start closer to 14 or 13% on red wines. And the reason for that is that if red wine is too cold, the tannins are too bitter. If red wine is too hot, then the alcohol is too blousy and the fruit is like all kind of squishy. So managing your temperature, I would suggest when it comes to red wines, put it in the fridge an hour or half an hour before you're going to enjoy it in South Africa in a temperate climate. And then the other element is like just chill it back down. Adding ice does dilute wine, so it does take away the original intent of what the wine's balance would look like. It'll change the dynamic between your acidity, the mouthfeel, the fruit, and if there's sugar in the wine. So that's last resort. But if I'm in the Karoo and I've got a bottle of white wine or a bottle of red wine that's too hot, chucking a bit of ice in there, giving a good stir and rinse, and then taking it out is one way. The other one, is just drink the wine and enjoy it.
But like you said, when you're in the Korea, the temperature is totally different to what we deem as normal. So Johan,
yes, correct.
The other thing that we touched on was accessing wine as an investment, and you had mentioned it as an AMC. I remember in the room when you said, does anyone know what an AMC is? I think I was one of the few people that put my hand up. So can we just debunk that? Because obviously I come from James's side of enjoying the wine, but I'm also on your side of investment and wealth management.
So I'll definitely start with the disclaimer that I'm not a structured finance specialist, but we've started in collaboration with a regulated entity locally, putting together an AMC, and an AMC is very simply an actively managed certificate. That's what the abbreviation is for. And an AMC is just a very flexible vehicle to put any asset class into. And the reason why we found it attractive for wine specifically is because wine is not a regulated asset class, it's not a formulated or formalized asset class as such. Definitely not in South Africa, and even globally where markets are more mature and the alternative investment asset classes and markets are more mature. Even there, wine is still viewed as something very niche. And so to that extent, an AMC is a great vehicle because it offers the investor the regulatory assurance of Swiss securitization of the vehicle itself and of the asset class across all service providers to the AMC that are regulated and made sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, but by the same time allowing the flexibility within the AMC of trading wine as you would share portfolio for that matter, or putting in a property ETF or anything of that nature. And what makes it so accessible is that within the fine wine world, getting involved with wine investment always sounds very intimidating. What exactly does it even mean? How does it work? People who have been involved in whiskey investment or whiskey costs or these kind of things will have a perception that you have to commit to some kind of early production of the product itself or buy a wine barrel or, how exactly does it work? And we just find the AMC to be terrific because it simplifies the whole process. How it works in very simple terms is you would buy a certificate within the AMC. The certificate has a £1,000 value. That £1,000 value is connected to the underlying asset, which in this case is fine wine. And then as we invest in and out of wine positions, we believe we can grow the value of that certificate. And what makes us even more, I would say, optimistic or excited about the prospect is the fact that the fine wine secondary market has come a long way over the last 20, 25 years by the advent of companies like Livex, who have really dialed down into liquidity of fine wine trade, having great historical data points. So even though wine has got a very, very long history, and I would think that of the, let's call it alternative assets, I think wine has got the deepest roots or the longest history. But really, in terms of formalized, it would be the last 20, 25 years where you find much greater data availability, transparency within the industry, just because of the advent of technology making things possible. And so the AMC, we think, is a great way for anyone to just have alternative asset exposure. Of course, it's never meant to be the bread and butter of your investments. But on top of that, if you've got an interest in fine wine and you enjoy fine wine, it's a great way to combine your passion for fine wine with something that we believe can actually give you some returns, and is a great diversification tool, as fine wine is not correlated to traditional asset class.
So here on Prestige Play, we're always talking about, this is about debunking wealth management and everything else within investment management. To me, the investment specialist mind in me is saying wine as an investment option is like taking a share certificate, dematerializing it, and putting it obviously now in an electronic format. And therefore, it is taking the actual physical wine, dematerializing it, and putting it into an AMC. Am I right in putting this type of correlation? I'm just trying to make our viewers and listeners, understand it at a more lower format.
100%, you're correct. If I understand your reference to dematerialization, it's 100% correct. You don't take physical receipt of any bottles, or you don't have to own or store bottles or anything of that nature. So exactly as you pointed out, you would buy a certificate, which is the same as you alluded to. If you buy a Satrix ETF or something, you don't physically own a bunch of, I don't know, would it be papers or certificates that you put in a safe somewhere. It's of course, you have e-shares or e-certificates which you own. And these certificates are then connected to an underlying portfolio, which make up the certificate value. And as this portfolio grows, of course, the certificate value tracks that. And at any point, if you wish to exit, it would be exactly the same way as you would contact your share broker or whatever to say, cool, I want to sell XYZ shares.
Selling out of a position.
100%. And then once they're liquidated, in line with your certificate value, and you're cashed out. So in that sense, I like the fact that you take a debunking position, because I think often people are intimidated. I think the fine wine world in general can be intimidating to people, because for a start, we're South Africans, we're not French, we're not Italian. So pronouncing all these state names and varieties itself can be intimidating, and you don't want to look like a fool in front of your friends, or when you go and visit these great regions in the world if you have the opportunity to do so. So that in itself can be intimidating. So if you then approach people and say, you can even invest in this, it can create a lot of clutter and fog and unnecessary uncertainty, I would say. So this is really a very simple solution, we think. It offers you the opportunity to buy a certificate, track the underlying asset, and that grows over time, and you exit it as you would any other position by a broker.
So all in all, we're just saying wine as an investment should be part of your diversification and part of your exposure. Now, on the other hand, James, the one thing that spoke to me the loudest from you was you want everyone to be enjoying wine. You want everyone to be drinking it. Please, that motto, can you just share it with our viewers?
Yeah, no, it's crucial. I think the magic of wine is, Johan alluded to the fact that it is an agricultural product. I believe it's one of the most magical and complex products that mankind is involved with. You've got a few iterations, and it's really wonderful to, if you consider these elements. You've got a specific plant, like a Cabernet Sauvignon versus a Merlot. That's already a difference. It's planted in a certain place, in a certain soil. So that could be a different country and different countries. Then you've got a vintage that takes place that it's got special kind of conditions that again create something unique to this Cabernet Sauvignon planted on this place, which is magical on this type of soil. And on top of that, you have a team of winemakers that have an aesthetic. They've got an artistic vision of what their wine should look like, how it should speak to you as a consumer, and how it should represent the place that it comes from. And that unique element, nothing like that exists in the world in terms of agricultural product or even artistic product. Because now we've got agriculture moving over to the area of art. But again, let's use this analogy. You bought a Picasso. Picasso is deemed to be a great painting. You can look at it for the rest of your life. It pretty much stays like that. If you buy a Canonical Paul Sauer and you look at it, it's changing all the time. And then there's a moment in time where it's deemed to be at its best. In other words, your Picasso painting has increased in its beauty, but then one day there's a magical moment where it starts going backwards as well. So you've got this ethereal connection to wine that comes from a specific place, from a specific time, created by an artistic team that has scarcity value because more and more people drink it, the less of it is. And then one moment is fleeting. One day it's going to be gone. So in that sense, wine is an emotional, special agricultural product that involves man and our beautiful planet all in one. And there's nothing else like that, at all on the planet. And I think humans should create occasions to appreciate what they're drinking. I think wine in a certain level is a beverage, and it's great to have a nice, easy drinking wine with your food on a daily basis. But when it comes to fine wine, it's crucial to think of what you want to do with the wine. How do you want to use it? Where's it going to do its work? So when you're buying wine for yourself, for your cellar, it's crucial also to engage with the product, to have a story that's connected to it, to remember why you bought it, think of when you're going to use it, and then bring your friends together and create an event around it, or events. You might have a beautiful kind of weekday party with some of your girlfriends. You've bought 2 or 3 champagnes for a specific region because you tasted them at this festival. You bought those bottles, and then what do you do with them? You're going to make sure that the wine is cold. You're going to make sure it's a great room. You're going to make sure you've got awesome glassware. You're going to make sure that you have kind of the right kind of foods, be it oysters, be it a interesting kind of combination of flavors to enhance that experience. And then you'll be able to tell your story around this wine, and people will remember it going forward. That is kind of the engagement of fine wine we need. And I think the beauty of South Africans are they're spoiled with incredible local wines. Our Cup Classics, our Syrahs, our Chardonnays, our Cabs are world class. I drink enough international wines to say that with confidence. And we make the best wine in Africa. And it would be great if Africa drinks African wine. I mean, it's a beautiful thing that we have right here.
I'm in agreement with you. I mean, even my GP says a glass of red wine a day is good for the heart. So all in all, we should all be drinking wine. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making the time to meet up with me. We will catch up with you later.